This video is walking you guys through your third and final essay assignment. And in this essay, we are switching gears completely. So we're no longer writing about the topic that you were writing about in your first two essays. We are looking at short stories and writing a literary analysis essay. So the goal here is to analyze, certain aspects of a piece of literature. So you're going to use the same skills that you had in your first two essays, where you're creating an argument about something, but you're applying that here to a piece of literature. So you're developing a written argument over a short story that you read in this unit. So you're analyzing that text and talking about specific narrative or literary elements. So the prompt is simple. Choose one of the short stories that you read in this unit. You're developing a written analysis of that work. Contextualize that by integrating the terminology that you've learned in this unit. Things like characterization, setting, plot, conflict. And you still need to create a concrete thesis argument around one of those foci. So what I highly suggest you do is, first off, choose the short story that was of the most interest to you, that you feel you have the most to say about. Secondarily, think about which sort of literary literary element you want to talk about. In Hills Like White Elephants, say that's your choice. Do you want to talk about the setting? Do you want to talk about the conflict? Do you want to talk about the symbolism? In The Cask of Amontillado, do you want to talk about dialogue or characterization, again, or setting? In Everyday Use, do you want to talk about I don't know, the symbolism of the objects? Is that what you want to talk about? In the Yellow Wallpaper, do you want to talk about metaphors or similes or things like that? Imagery. These are the things that you guys can pick from, and I want you guys to choose not only the text that's of the most interest, but what about that text is of most interest to you. If it were me personally, for example, I might love to talk about the symbolism in Hills Like White Elephants, or I might like to talk about the setting of the Cask of Amontillado, or the characterization of a certain character in Everyday Use. I could certainly write 2.5 to 3.5 pages on all of these topics. So choose a primary focus, right? Say symbolism or setting or characterization, and then let that kind of guide the main ideas that you choose. So think about, what's the primary element you want to focus on? Is there, say, a literary theory that you want to apply to your analysis? So if I'm going to do characterization in Everyday Use, I might apply a feminist theory to that text, or say the Yellow Wallpaper, same thing. If I was going to do the Cask of Amontillado, I might try a more I don't know, a new critical lens or something like that. Think about the argument that you want to make about that literary element. So it's the why. Why does an author do X or use X? So, for example, in The Cask of Amontillado, if I'm going to make the argument that the setting is important to the narrative because it provides the means for the characters to, to have a meaningful dialogue, or because it provides the tonal aspects of the narrative, or because, say, that the setting is important because it sets up the conflict between the two characters. Those are all main ideas that contribute to my argument that the setting is central in the Cask of Amontillado to the character and conflict development. That might be my thesis claim. And that's me making an argument about the text. So anytime that you analyze a piece of literature and you say what the author is trying to do here is X, or what the author is trying to say here is X, then you're making an argument about it. And then you're doing analysis around that idea. If, for example, in Hills Like White Elephants, you want to make the argument that Hemingway was using the dialogue and the unspoken, aspect of abortion through the dialogue to demonstrate that, the post-war I don't know, post-war freedoms of the new society, that's an argument. If you want to say in the yellow wallpaper that um, the characters' rounded development from a woman suffering postpartum to postpartum depression to a madness, essentially uh, demonstrates the oppression of women in marriage. That's an argument. So there's all kinds of arguments you can make about these texts. You need to think about the why. Why does an author do or use a certain element? Why does he do something, or why does she use a certain particular literary element? Why would they not just, why would, for example, in The Hills Like White Elephants, why doesn't Hemingway just come out and say, this is about abortion, right? Because there's something he's trying to do with that. So, what other literary elements does the author use? So, while you should have sort of a certain main focus, that doesn't mean you can't talk about other things. So, for example, in the example I gave you about the Cask of Amontillado, the general focus that I'm keeping here is on the importance of the setting. But in my thesis claim, I also talked a little bit about the characterization and the conflict. Those are different literary elements that I'm weaving into my argument. And then you can think about, how does the author influence the work? So in Hills Like White Elephants, how does Hemingway's own experiences in the war inform this story about post-war generation, of expats, which is exactly what he was? How does Gilman's own experience with the rescuer influence her experience with the character's development in the yellow wallpaper? And then lastly, what kind of critique could you make about this text in a scholarly manner? So what elements about it could you critique? Critique doesn't have to be negative, but think about what you as a scholar could say about this text. So because it is required, you have to have one scholarly source from the database, the library database. When you go into the database, EBSCOhost is always a great place to look for literary scholarly articles. And I recommend that you just kind of look by looking at the titles of the texts, or even by the author names. So anything in that realm would be fine. If you want to talk about, say, Hills Like White Elephants, you'll undoubtedly find tons of scholarly articles talking about symbolism and setting and conflict and characterization. If you look at the yellow wallpaper, you could search by that. There's tons of articles there. You can also search by, say, Gilman's own name, Charlotte Perkins Gilman, and you might find information about the influence of the rescuer, or her own biography here on the text, which would be useful. Whatever you do, you pull out specific quotes from those articles to support your claims, just like you do any form of evidence. Make sure you cite them in text and on a bibliography. Everything should be credible, of course, which it will be if you find it from the database. And then you're welcome to use additional sources if you like. Your essay needs to be 2.5 to 3.5 pages in length and is due by Sunday, December 4th at 11:59 p.m. That means to the middle of the second page at minimum. Make sure you have proper MLA, everything's checked for plagiarism. And of course, because we are using sources and we're having an analysis of these texts, the bibliography is required. So there will be a short outline that's meant to help guide you. That's 20 points, and then a final draft is 80 points. So 20% of your essay grade comes from your outline. That's a 20% boost. So if you do the outline, you get those automatic 20 points, and then your final draft is 80. So you're going to be assessed and making sure you have good, close analysis of the work and its major concepts, good evidence to support your claims from the primary and secondary sources, proper number of research sources, proper page length, MLA formatting, citations, and then a fully developed essay structure as usual. So it's an introduction with a thesis claim, clear main ideas with evidence and analysis, and a conclusion that restates your thesis and your main ideas in new words. I put some ideas here just to help guide you as you think about what you want to talk about within these different short stories. You could talk about characterization. So within that, you could talk about archetypes, protagonists, antagonists, secondary development. Are they flat, round, dynamic, static? You could talk about literary devices. So things about similes, metaphors, personification, foreshadowing, flashbacks, irony. You can look at the structure of the work. So think about the dramatic arc, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, the denouement. Think about the conflict, man versus society, man versus nature. And then think about things like the point of view. Is this first person? Is it third person omniscient? Why does that matter? You could also think about literary concepts like themes, motifs, symbols, allusions, that kind of thing. And then lastly, you can also think about the historical context. So if you're going to talk about Hills Like White Elephants, what was happening in the world at this time? Same thing with, everyday use. How does the author's own background influence that experience? You can look at the historical events, the ethical, social, or moral issues being discussed around this time period, the author's own biography as well. And like I said, choose what is of most interest to you, not only which work, but what about that work that you want to talk about. So this is purposely broad because, again, I want you guys to choose what's most interesting, and let me know if you have any questions as you start to work. And this essay, you do not have to have the idea cleared through me first. You're welcome to write about what you want, but if you want to send me an email, if you have any questions or want some thoughts or feedback, you're more than welcome to do that. Let me know if you have any questions as you work.